Next, we'll put the primers in with a Sinclair priming tool. We'll put a primer in the priming tool, put the case in the shell holder, and turn it to lock it securely in place. We want to make sure that the primer is fully seated in the primer pocket and that the primer is flush or below flush with respect to the case head. This will prevent a slam fire from occurring in the magazine or chamber because the primer was protruding above the case head. Let's finish priming the entire batch. Okay, we have all of our cases ready with primers seated, so let's set up the powder measure. We looked in our reloading handbook and determined we want to throw 25.0 grains of Vitavori N135 powder behind our Nosler 55 grain ballistic tips. We got that right out of the book, and you'll note that it isn't a maximum load. Even though we are using a load in the middle of the load range, we'll still watch for high pressure signs when we go to the range. Let's stop for a second and talk about some of those signs. A common indicator of high pressure is severe primer cratering. Under normal pressure, a fired primer will have a somewhat flattened edge and a firing pin indentation that will have a small raised edge. Under high pressure, the primer edge will be severely flattened and the dimple will have a distinctive raised edge, almost a burr. You can easily feel it with your fingernail. This is not always the most reliable indicator. A shiny ring around the body of the case, just above the extractor groove, can be an indication of case head expansion, which can mean that high pressure has been reached. You can measure this expansion with a blade micrometer and compare the measurement to a factory round. Another sign of high pressure is black soot on the case head around the edge of the fired primer. Spent primers falling out of the case or new primers that feel loose as you seat them are other indications of high pressure. Difficult case extraction is a very reliable sign of high pressure. If you've ever had to beat your bolt open, you're definitely shooting some hot loads and reaching some very high pressures, which can be dangerous to you and others around you. Ejector marks on the case head show up as half round or round shiny spots on the case head. This is another good sign of high pressure. If you have a chronograph and measure velocities that are significantly higher than published values for maximum loads, then you probably are achieving very high pressures in your firearm. No matter how much experience you have reloading, these indicators are something all of us should watch for. Let's get back to the powder measure. The Reading powder measure we are using is set up with a correct charge. First, we're going to cycle about 10 throws through the measure and then replace the powder back in the reservoir. This procedure removes compressed powder that resulted when we first filled the reservoir. We'll put this powder back into the top of the reservoir. Try to keep your powder reservoir always filled about a third of the way. This will avoid light compression of the powder into the powder drum and make your charges more consistent. Next, we'll throw one charge into the scale pan and check it against the desired 25.0 grains. I already have our AccuLab scale zeroed. Our AccuLab scale tells us we are right on the money, so it is good to go. You can either charge an entire loading block full of cases or charge an individual case and move to the bullet seating operation. Give all of your cases a good visual scan to make sure that all the cases have powder. This is very important. You don't want a case with either a partial charge or a no charge. This is a good way to get a bullet stuck in your barrel, and like any obstruction, will cause a dangerous and potentially lethal situation. When you're using a powder measure, make sure you cycle the handle fully in both directions. At the bottom of the stroke on this powder measure, it ensures that the drum is completely filled. When you cycle the handle up, it makes sure that the drum is completely emptied. Okay, the cases are charged. Let's seat some bullets. All bullet seaters have an adjustable stem in them that you move up and down with the die to achieve a different seating depth. In this exercise, we're going to seat the bullets so the overall length of the cartridge from base to tip is equal to what we see in the reloading manual. Let's set up our bullet seater. First, let's get the full length die out of here, and we'll thread the bullet seater into the press. And again, we have the lock ring backed off, and again, we'll raise the ram to the utmost position. And we want to thread the seater down until it just contacts the ram in this position. In this demonstration, we have decided to disengage the crimping feature of the bullet seater. To do this, turn the bullet seater one full turn back away from the shell holder. By doing this, we disengage the crimping feature. We want to spin the lock ring down until it contacts the top of the press again, and then secure it. If we were going to use the crimping feature, we would have turned the seater back toward the shell holder until we reached the desired amount of crimp. The decision to crimp bullets is partially dependent on the bullet design and whether you're concerned about bullet movement in the case neck while it is under recoil in the magazine or during feeding. In most situations, the tension of the case provides enough bullet grip to securely hold the bullet in place. If you're loading for a hunt or a tactical competition, you may choose to crimp your bullets to ensure reliability. Now that the die is in place, let's set the seating depth. We want to back the seater plug out so that when a charge case with a bullet is raised into the die, the bullet does not contact the seating stem. With a case and a bullet raised fully into the die, adjust the seating stem until it just contacts the bullet, and we're right there. You'll feel it touch. Back the case out of the die, and then begin turning the bullet stem a quarter of a turn at a time, and then raise the case back into the die. This should result in the bullet being partially seated. Now begin a trial and error process of turning the seating stem into the die until you reach the desired overall cartridge length. A quarter of a turn at first is good until you get close to the length. Then you may want to move the stem in 1/8 turn increments. We'll repeatedly check with our calipers as we go to check the case length. Not there yet. Perfect. Finally, lock the seater stem in place with a lock nut. Since the bullet we are using has a boat tail, most reloaders will set their bullets on top of the case and then pick the whole assembly up as one unit. Place the completed assembly into the shell holder and then raise the ram fully up into the die. Go slowly at first to make sure a cockeyed bullet doesn't hit the side of the seating die. Let's check the length one more time. That's perfect, we're good to go. So let's seat the rest of these rounds. We'll get our cartridge box out because after we seat each bullet, we want to put the completed round right back into the cartridge box. After we finish loading the rounds, it is important to clearly label the cartridge box. Use a load label from Sinclair International or make your own. You want to identify the date loaded, the type of brass, the bullet type including weight, the primer, and the powder type and charge. Include lot numbers in your data, especially for powder and primers. You should also record this information in a reloading log for the particular firearm you are loading for. This documentation will also let you keep track of the rounds fired through your gun. You can also use your reloading log to keep track of performance as well. That covers the basic steps in loading a bottleneck cartridge.